Well, guys, the time has come. It's the end of New Moon and our final week with my brother Jacob. If you have been following along, you already know Jake has not read anything or watched any of the Twilight movies. He just went in cold to reading New Moon. So, Jake, let's jump in. This was by far the most heavy vampire lore
I
of
know, yeah,
the whole book so far.
for
So tell
sure.
us if in this last chunk you learned anything new or any like misunderstandings you want to correct, and then we'll move into your overall thoughts on
Yeah,
the experience.
I some deep disappointment because I thought I had grasped a key thing. Like I figured out a twist, and then like a chapter later, it was impossible. It was both I formed a theory and debunked it within a chapter, which was very sad. Let me just go through. So first thing
No,
I
we gotta
learned is
hear
that
what the theory is.
oh, okay. Well, I mean, I gotta. Well, okay. So basically, it's with the whole Bella, like what's going on with Bella stuff. So like that's been a lot of. I assumed that it was Edward genuinely talking to her and not like, which then him being like, what? I don't know what's going on. Just like, which I still think so. Okay, I still maintain it's either like I just don't know Stephenie Meyer's like writing style. If because I get the whole thing is very like it's trying to be Romeo and Juliet, so things are like overly dramatic to fit that and stuff. Um, but Callie's like,
Kelly shrugging.
anyways,
I don't know.
so I guess there was a series of misunderstandings I realized leading up to this. But so because I think we talked about it last time, I figured out that Edward was the only one who could read minds, and I before thought all vampires could do that. So I think I was under the assumption that whatever was going on with Bella interacting with Edward was Edward's special thing. And then when I got the connection that Edward was the only one who could read minds, I didn't like update that previous because I think going into it, it's weirder if you know Edward has a thing, especially like seeing the other vampires here. They all like they have a very specific thing. It's not like, oh, they all loosey goosey can do different things. It's like, here's your shtick. You got this cool superpower. And so I think I would have been like more questioning what was going on there. So now I think it's either, which I also when Bella's like coming to terms with it, she's like, oh, before I thought I was either going mad or this was the longing of my heart. And now I realize it's just because I love him or he loves me. I'm like, how does that explain anything? Like, that doesn't. So now I think it's like Bella's vampire ability or it's nothing. So it's because also when they talk to the Italy vampires, they said, oh, I told you to go out and get one, referring to Edward, and you brought back two and a half. So like if you take that as she's like some part vampire, there's maybe something there. But anyways, so I was also my big exciting thing was that I thought that the explanation for why, because also we got the whole like other vampire powers equally don't work on Bella, although for some reason Alice's do because she can see Bella's future. So I don't know.
I
That's
had that
confusing.
same question. I don't know what that's about, but
Yeah.
and maybe it's
Um,
answered and I just wasn't paying attention. But
but I thought so if we take that and then we combine that with what I thought was the case, which also turns out to be false, which was that vampire powers don't work on werewolves, right?
mm,
Because I thought Alice couldn't see Jacob, which is also debunked in this reading group because Edward can read Jacob's thoughts, and that
Yep.
is a thing. So that debunks it. But so I thought there was going to be some combined with me not really knowing the like past of Bella's like family situation. I thought it was that Charlie was actually like more related to the people who lived on the reservation that I thought. And because we know werewolves is like a bloodline thing. So I thought
Mhm.
that was going to be the explanation for Bella's powers is that she was actually like distantly part werewolf and now she's like part vampire and that's the
That would
and
be
then I
more
think
interesting.
it just doesn't
I
pan
like
out
that.
that way. So that was my like I was like, yo, I figured it out. Clearly book 3 twist. And then is like, oh, and then Edward is reading Jacob's thoughts. I'm like, oh wait, hold on. This doesn't work.
Yeah, interesting theory,
I
but
like that theory. I like that.
But it's interesting because it also, like, I assume, like, it's because I don't know what happened in book. Like I don't really understand, like, why Charlie knows all these guys on the reservation is really so like, maybe I think it's maybe a theory that only makes sense if you've done what I did, but it was also like,
I mean, yeah, I
in the
still think
middle of that.
it could make sense and is interesting.
I mean, it could,
Not the mind reading thing, because that's just false. But Charlie, being part werewolf or like distant relatives, because it's a tiny town, but they're friends. Yeah. It's a small town and they're the single men.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of it.
Yeah. But is that interesting? I guess I didn't realize. I think reading this, the vampire powers seem way more like hard magic-y, if that's a term people are familiar with. Whereas I assumed it was more like loosey-goosey, having like very little experience with the vampires up until now. So that was interesting to me. I think so. Another vampire power thing that I'm curious about is also, like, I guess Edward has a range to mind reading, because seemingly he like couldn't read her mind, or like there was things he didn't know. So I don't know. I mean, that was, again, because I thought what was happening was like because of Edward's stuff. I assumed he could like infinitely, because Alice talked about she could attune to people and then she like would get visions to them. I assumed Edward was also like attuned to Bella, and so he was reading her mind even though they weren't at all by each other.
I'm gonna interject here.
Yeah.
Have we decided that we're gonna answer things for Jacob in this one?
Yeah, I was gonna ask the same thing because I had something to talk about. I don't know. I think that if Jacob wants us to or doesn't want to.
That was most of my. Let me just my other things I realized real quick was they mentioned Edward's irises being black in this. So I think that the like gold eyes is like less of a they don't drink blood, and it's something else. So I guess I got more confused by how the eyes work. That was mainly it. I think that was mainly it. Yeah. So there you go. Those are my thoughts. Feel free to elucidate me on how I'm deeply confused, but
great. Well, some basic things to clear up from that.
Okay, excellent.
Are one, Edward cannot read Bella's mind.
No. Oh, yeah. I knew that.
Yeah.
Okay, you just said.
Maybe I misspoke. Yeah.
That's okay. Yeah, he can't read her mind at all. Yeah. And their irises are red when they are full and have drank human blood, black when they are hungry, like they haven't fed in a long time, and golden for the Cullens because they all drink deer/forest creature blood, not human blood.
So the eyes are like their fuel meter.
Yes, correct. Yes.
Gotcha.
Hence all the comments about the dark eyes.
Yeah. Okay.
Mm-hmm. I also don't know if we want to talk more about Bella and hearing Edward. This is something that Callie couldn't remember what exactly it was either, so we talked about it a lot when we weren't talking with you, Jake. And I remembered and knew it was a huge letdown.
It was not a huge letdown, and then I was waiting for like a bigger letdown because we still got an answer. Like, it was a dumb answer, but we got an answer. And then I thought they weren't going to address it at all, like frickin' Victoria, because of last week. Being like, no, don't have too many expectations, Callie.
Yeah. See, the thing is, I haven't read the books in a really long time, and in the movies, they don't address it. So I didn't remember how much was addressed, but I knew the whole time that it was just hallucinations. Like, that's all.
Yeah, that's disappointing. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's just a lot of.
Yeah. We're gonna talk more about it later, unless you want to be included in the whole episode, Jake, because we're not trying to hide anything. So if you want to stay on for 2 hours instead of another 10 minutes, you can. But I have a lot to say.
Yeah, I don't want to ruin your guys' dynamic, but
You can stay on. It's your choice. You just have to decide now, so it's not awkward.
I mean, I'm probably not going to stay on the whole time because I have a thing to be at 6. But
okay.
Okay. A thing. sorry. A non-vampire thing, but like plot thing was like the whole scene with him kind of proposing to her of like, well, if we get married first, let's just, and her like deep opposition to that, I assume makes more sense in the context of knowing at all what happened to her parents' relationship. But
barely.
Okay.
Barely. It's idiotic. Ugh.
Honestly, we don't have like a ton of context behind her parents' relationship. We definitely have more than you have, but not a lot. So,
yeah.
I was also minorly surprised that Edward calls Esme his mom, because I still don't really get like how familial it is versus like
you had said previously you weren't sure if you thought Carlisle and Esme were actually together or just like presenting that way. Do you have thoughts on that? Or
yeah, I think they're actually together. And then also I guess is Alice and Jasper, are they like a couple? Because they had like a big reunion.
Couples. All of them
okay.
are.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Because they have said that like vampire pairs are like a big.
Yeah. Edward is the 7th wheel.
But not for long.
Yeah, he was the 7th wheel, and he has been the 7th wheel for like a really freaking long time, at least like 50 years.
Yeah, I think like 50. 50
yeah.
60, maybe.
And it had, but Edward was the first to join. So it went Carlisle. Carlisle made Edward.
Mm-hmm.
Very shortly after, Carlisle turned Esme, who as a human was in love with him when Carlisle was a vampire. Anyways,
he like
she was in love with him.
Yeah.
Her life. Carlisle only turns people in the hospital who are imminently dying, and deserve to live.
Yeah, Alice, he didn't turn. Is it just those two that he turned, and the rest like
no?
Emmett also,
and Rosalie. Yeah.
Okay, gotcha. So it's just everyone, but
just not Alice and Jasper.
Alice.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then so it was the two of them, and they talk about specifically that they've always taken on a parent role, even though Edward was at it before Esme. And then Carlisle saved Rosalie with hopes that Rosalie would be Edward's mate, but they hated each other. And then Rosalie found Emmett and brought him back and asked Carlisle to save him. And then Alice and Jasper, with crazy Alice future mind things, knew to find the Cullens because she saw in her future this family. And she was with Jasper by that point. So then she brought them together.
And fun fact, that Emmett was attacked by bears, and that's why he was going to die. And now he likes to attack bears and eat them. So that's kind of fun.
True.
Get your revenge.
Yeah.
Foreshadowing for the bear plot point in this book, clearly.
Yeah.
We have made some man versus bear references. Yeah.
Sure. I just saw a note I hadn't read of there's a line that Esme looked like she would be crying if that were possible, which is interesting. That I guess I don't know if that's literally that vampires can't cry, or if it was just like Esme is very stoic, but both kind of interesting, I think.
I think it's just that they can't cry.
That's an interesting.
Yeah.
If you don't know, humans are the only animals that cry. So it's like a very less human, like your humanity if you can't cry. I think that's fun. I don't know if that's what they're going for. But yeah, because it's like just a social thing, right? Like you only cry to signal to other people that you're upset, which other animals don't do. So.
What a time.
Fun animal facts with Jacob.
Yeah. Well, Jake, I'm curious, if you were rating this book what you would rate it. And
Yeah.
for the book girlies, let's do a Goodreads rating, aka a star rating, 1 through 5. Halves
1 through
are
5.
allowed. Halves are allowed.
Gotcha. Can you is 0 stars a thing you can do on Goodreads? I'm not saying I'm not going to do this. I'm just for the. Is it a
I don't
5-point
know.
scale or a 6-point scale? Is
I
it
think it's
0
a 5.
indexed?
I think it's 5-point. I don't think you can do a 0-star rating.
Okay. Okay. So 3 is
Average. Yes.
Okay. Not 2.5 being average. All right. Good.
Yes.
I'd give it a, I think like a 3.5 then. Something like
Cool.
that. Like I liked it. It was a good time. I think the I don't know. I mean, so like Bella is definitely like overly dramatic for me as on to like connect more as an emotional level. But it's that weird mix of like sometimes she's very like emotionally mature when describing the situation, and then sometimes she's not. Like I don't know. There's an interesting mix of like the like I'm very down for this lifeline commitment with a vampire, and it's like marriage. Like it's just like a weird mix of like one of those feels very like emotionally mature and one feels very not. Um, but I don't know. I was surprised by the amount of like more like actiony stuff. Like you know, this last kind of section was a little more like, oh, there's a car chase, and we're like, I mean, it's not chase, but you know, there's like
The friggin' car chases.
You
Thank
should
God
read
it was toned down.
car chase.
I know.
New
I
Moon car
keep
chase is insane.
Twilight.
I
It's
do
Twilight.
enjoy.
Midnight Sun. Midnight Sun.
There's still a weird amount of focus on the cars all the time, which like in the acknowledgments at the end, it's like thanks to my brother Jacob for giving advice on like the cars. And I'm like, was this necessary? Like,
This is something we
her
talked about.
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
Also that her brother is named Jacob. In case you hadn't picked up on that.
Yeah. Well, that was like 5 of the characters are her siblings. It said in the acknowledgments, but Jacob obviously
Yes.
the most main character. No, Edward was not one of her siblings, believe it or not.
And her mother-in-law's name is Victoria.
Oh,
That
I didn't realize
It's
that.
problematic.
It is. Yeah, she did have a line of like, "I'm sorry if you're upset by what the character's named after you did." That's funny. That's funny.
So do you have predictions on what happens the rest of the series then?
Oh.
Yeah. I mean, I was much more excited when I thought my like vampire werewolf lineage thing was going to be correct. No, so I mean, I imagine. I mean, I don't know. I think it depends how much of like a time skip they do, right? Because if they jump off, I don't know. Are they like all? They seem to all currently be high school seniors, or I mean, Edward and Bella are high school seniors, right?
Mhm.
So I don't know. I mean, yeah. So like, so because there's the emotional, you know, what is she going to become a vampire? And then there's the kind of like conflict based thing of like, are um the Italian vampires going to come attack? Which would then involve the werewolves, and then presumably the ideal situation is you have some like less antagonistic relationship at the end with Jacob. But you know, I don't know. It's that weird like actual like more kind of like adult romance stories I've read, like they have a higher chance of like just, oh, it's a sad ending, and like you know, you can like lean more into like it's a tragedy. That feels weirder for like a trilogy that's like YA to do. So I kind of expect to be like mostly everything's.
It's a quad. It's a quad also.
It's a quad. What does that mean?
It's 4 books, not 3.
Is it? I thought it was Twilight, New Moon, Eclipse.
Breaking Dawn.
Breaking Dawn. There's 2 more books. Okay, so I imagine there's some.
We're reading. Though that's the original 4. There are additional 3 published.
Right. There's the Edward's perspective.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay.
One is Edward's POV.
Yeah.
One is a new story based on a small character in Eclipse.
Mm-hmm.
One is the original Twilight books, but gender swapped. That's not fanfic. Yeah. So
that'd be interesting to read that first, and like are some things more or less like creepy, I guess. You know what I mean? It's that like, I don't know.
I don't know if a much older, 115-year-old powerful woman praying. I mean, it's still weird, but
Yeah, I mean, that's interesting because you always see it as the man being the old one. So that'll be
Yeah.
interesting to read that.
Yeah. I don't know. It might not change anything, but it might. I don't know. I'd be curious.
But
But
what, the only people that aren't gender swapped in it are Bella's parents? Is that right? Yeah.
I believe,
okay.
yeah,
So he lives with his dad in.
Yeah.
Phoenix.
Oh, it's in
No.
Phoenix.
No, the dad is in Forks.
In Forks. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
Okay.
not gender swapped.
Yeah.
Great. Well, Jake,
What a
do
time.
you think based on New Moon you would ever read the rest of the Twilight books?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely watch the movies. I'd like.
They're
I
worse.
mean, oh, okay,
They're
that's a
a lot
bummer.
worse, but I love them.
A
Like,
lot
very
worse. Oh, okay.
Yeah, I
significant.
feel like we gotta have a thing where Jacob watches at least one of the movies.
Oh,
Maybe that'll be
okay.
one of the bonus episodes.
Ooh, maybe Breaking Dawn Part 2, you know? That's a good one to watch.
The best movie.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'd check them out. Like, I don't think I'd do it independently, but like you know, like if the three of us were chatting about you know, like it's fun if I have a person to be like, hey, this just happened. What like that? I think that's a lot more fun for like something I'm not as intrinsic. Like I don't know. I could see like I've been reading Throne of Glass lately, and like I'm like 4 books in, and it's gotten a lot better. So like I could
No spoilers.
no, yeah, I'm not going to. But like I could see Stephenie Meyer's like she seems like a competent enough author. She could write books that I really like. And like the story has enough like interesting components that I could see myself really like it. I don't necessarily expect it to go in that direction, but it's like yeah, you know, I guess that's more the my attitude. I'm like, oh yeah, there's some potential. There was some stuff I liked, but I wasn't like, oh man, I'm
Yeah.
so invested. Like,
I do think Stephenie Meyers has a pretty big jump as an author and skill level, but it's not midway through the series like you see that kind of dramatic transition in Throne of Glass. And even that, I would argue, when you get to the end of the series, you realize the beginning of the series is better written than you thought.
Sure.
Things you find out. But the jump really is from Twilight to the Host, and people rave over the Host being like incredible. They can't believe it's the same author. So,
Really?
yeah.
The Host is like it's like very similar genre wise, right? But it's just like the story's totally unrelated.
It's kind of
It's like another
like,
supernatural romance.
yeah, but it's like Animorphs if the Animorph characters fell in love with the blobs in their head, but
I
they couldn't
gotcha. The yurts.
the yurts. Yeah, but they couldn't transform. Forget the Animorph part. Just the
Ignore the Animorph part of Animorphs, and then it's basically that.
yeah, that's
Okay, gotcha.
it. Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Anyway.
so I don't know. It was a fun time. I really enjoyed doing this. Like this was a great format for me. I don't know. It was fun.
Great.
I'll definitely like take a break from Twilight, but I think I'm intrigued enough to check out more in the future for sure, I guess.
Cool. Well, thanks for joining us for the last 4 weeks, Jake. We got a lot to talk about with this final chunk of the book. So we'll let you go and we'll jump in since you don't want to keep chatting for 2 more hours.
I mean, you know, I know both of you, so we can chat later, unrelated to the podcast.
I don't know if I have more energy to talk about it. You'll have to,
you really
you'll have to listen to the episode. Yeah.
I do want to do that for sure. Like, I'm definitely going to go back and listen. Can I listen to the podcast without reading Twilight? There's a separate.
There you go.
I'm not sure if you can.
I think we get better.
That might
we
be
do
actually
get better
fun.
over time, but
yeah. Anyway,
the first episode not so much.
Yeah. All right. Bye, Jake.
All right. Been a great time.
Thank
so
you.
Long.
Should we jump in?
Chapter 19. Yeah.
Chapter 19. Oof, duh. Okay. First off, so we start on the plane. Oh, I feel like I need to take a breath, psych myself up for this. Okay, so we start on the plane and talking about how slow everything is taking and or going. And I feel like this is just interesting mirroring from Midnight Sun and Edward coming when Bella is in imminent danger with James. So that's kind of interesting. Mm-hmm. And then on the plane, I have pretty minimal notes for chapter 19, but Alice explains a little more about the Volturi.
Mm-hmm.
And we find out that Alice offers to turn Bella herself.
Yeah.
Which is a big deal that we come back to later.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. Anything, any comments you want to add about any of those things?
I also don't have a lot of notes on this chapter. I'm trying to think if by this point does she call Jasper? Does that happen before or after that?
I mean, she calls Jasper a few times. But
Really?
specifically, she is before it's in this chapter that I think initially on the front end that she calls Jasper and convinces the boys not to come.
Yeah, and I just had I guess I don't really have a lot of notes on that, but that was just something of note. Yeah, I don't really honestly have a lot of notes on this.
Yeah, cool.
Yep.
Yeah, so definitely a big deal that she offers to turn Bella is huge, which also like of course, because it's become such a bigger like this thing that's causing so many more issues. So I think it's very reasonable of Alice. My final thought for chapter 19 is that freaking we have to hear about the cars they're gonna steal again.
Yeah, I also made a comment about like she says something about how like Edward might do something conspicuous like throwing a Buick through a wall, and I'm like, why not just say a car? Why does it have to be a Buick? They just get so specific about the details around the cars that
Yeah.
are
Also, do we think there's a lot of Buicks driving around in old Italy?
no, say a Fiat. Like that's much more likely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know.
That's
The weird
fine.
detail again.
A Buick, just a giant tank of a car going through those little Italian roads.
I know.
Nonsense.
And then also in this chapter, Bella is convinced that Edward is like still doesn't like her, isn't in love with
Yeah.
her, that
Yeah.
sort of thing. So
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, which just keeps on going on. Did you have something else you add?
Oh, I had a note here talking about Alice talks about their family compared to like the Volturi and other vampires, and about how them abstaining from drinking human blood makes it easier for them to be civilized and form bonds based on love rather than survival or convenience, which I thought was interesting. It makes me question like the other like vampire couples we see. Not that we've seen a ton so far, but we end up seeing more. Like, are they all based on survival and convenience? Like, what about Victoria and James and like her seeking vengeance? Is it out of love or is it something else? So I just thought that was interesting and something I've given a lot of thought to. So
Yeah, I am gonna talk more about the mates thing later because I think that this book, the only way it really makes sense for me is that it's fated mates and it's some kind of like magical like power balance thing. Yeah, but we'll talk about it. We'll talk about it more in an upcoming chapter here. Yeah. Anything else you want to add before we jump into chapter 20?
I'm just looking through my notes. Are we? Yeah. Yeah, so the end of chapter 19, they get into the city of Volterra. I made a note that I liked that they changed the one thing that I liked that they did more in the movies than in the books is changing what the people were wearing in the crowd. I'm like, it just makes it very cinematic in the movie how they're all wearing the red like hooded cloaks and whatnot.
Yeah, it's so good.
And in the book, it's more, there's a bunch of red everywhere, but it's not everybody in those hooded cloaks. So I just liked that.
Yeah, that's in chapter 20.
No, but I have it highlighted right here. It talks about the streets are full of people in red flags.
Oh.
It talks more about it, I think, in chapter 20, but
okay, yeah.
I also had some notes about the Volturi when Alice is talking about them. I forgot how large the Volturi was, which it makes sense that it's large, but like the actual family is smaller than the Cullens, but then they have the guard, which makes it bigger, she says. So
right.
And then I kind of had questions about like, so they have this holiday for Father Marcus, who is a member of the Volturi, and I'm like, do they just not go out in public then? Like, you know?
Yeah. I mean, I think maybe, but also think about a like painting of George Washington. If you saw an actual person, would you be like, oh, that's obviously George Washington, you know?
They're all pale and have red eyes and stuff, you know? That's...
Yeah. I mean, I'm guessing they don't go out a ton.
Yeah.
They don't leave the city, so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just something that I had logistic questions about, but
yeah.
That's all I have for 19, though. So we can get into 20.
All right, great. Alrighty, chapter 20.
Yeah.
We start off with another car racing tense scene.
Sure do.
Okay. We all know I am liking this book less than Twilight, but the fact that the suspense is like the same things, like just replayed. I get it's different, but it's not that different, you know? Like,
I mean, to be fair, in Twilight, we did not get a car scene. We got that in Midnight Sun, like, which came after.
That's true.
Like, if you were reading them in publishing order, we wouldn't have had this yet. But
yeah.
So
that's true.
Yeah.
But still the imminent death, race to them, you know, which maybe it's supposed to be this like flipped thing, you know, of now she's racing to Edward. I don't know. I just don't think it's that interesting.
Yeah.
I've not been into this book, guys, but I think the best chapter maybe of the whole series so far is 21. So next chapter. Anyways.
Happens in 21, but we'll get there.
Yeah, that's everything with the Volturi.
That makes sense, yeah. We get the most lore there, and it's the most fantasy-like of all of them.
It's a fantasy chapter.
It is of the fantasy series. It's the one chapter we get the most fantasy.
Yeah. Oh, so funny. Which makes me think I'm gonna like the next two books more.
I know. I'm a little like disappointed we didn't have Jacob come in the next book. Like,
I know we should have.
We didn't think about it hard enough. We were like, oh, let's just see how confused he is when Edward is just in South America, but we didn't realize that that is not how the book starts off. So
nope. We didn't remember enough to know when the good moment would have been.
Yeah.
We could have told Dallas and she could have fact checked us, but Dallas was against the idea from the beginning. So anyways, chapter 20, car racing. And then we do have a little run-in with some Italian police. Thankfully, we do not drug them. We just bribe them. We just bribe them in this book.
Yeah, yeah.
Cash. Um, yeah. We get another, thankfully, not as long of a description about how fashionable Alice is being in the middle of this crisis. But we do get a nice little moment of the long tan leather gloves
Yeah,
reaching out
yeah.
the car window.
I did kind of like the detail though, because it's like she's sticking her hand out and Bella's like gasping because she's like, oh, she's gonna expose
Yeah.
herself in the sun or whatever. But it's like, oh no, she's wearing a glove. But
Yeah.
yeah,
Still just, I love an Alice fashion moment in the middle of a high tense crisis.
yeah. I also love in the movie how she has like this head scarf on and just like, yeah, these
She's
sunglasses.
like, she's leaned into it. So she's like iconic old school glamour in a like convertible, you know?
Her pixie cut.
Of course.
Nothing says old school glamour like a pixie cut.
Oh man. Yeah. Okay. Anyways, so after we get through all of that, because we all know none of us care. None of us care. Okay. So Bella is running through the sea of people. This is another good time to hop onto YouTube to watch me reenact this
I
scene.
like that the actions you're doing are exactly the same actions you did the last time when
It's my running action.
it's so lifelike and realistic.
I don't run in real life. I just watched Tron one time. So okay. Anyways, she's running through the sea of red, which again, the movie did it better. Like, you know, the idea that they're all in this cloak. One of the most iconic scenes. It's such a good movie scene. So they did a good job.
I have a fun fact about that I learned recently that so it was shot actually it wasn't in Volterra but it was an Italian town that they shot this in and there was not a fountain there. They built the fountain just so she could run through it. I
Really?
mean,
Is the fountain still there?
so it's not like a real fountain, but no, it's not there anymore. So like if you go and visit, it's like, where's the fountain? Like, but yeah, I really like that they did that. It made it much more dramatic.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was dramatic in the book also. Yeah, this scene was good. It went on. No, it was good. It was a good amount of time. I was going to say it went on a little too long, but that's not true. It was a good amount.
My first comment that I have is when she sees him and talks about how beautiful he is, and she runs, and that even, or she says, the last 7 months meant nothing, and his words in the forest meant nothing. And I'm like, I fucking hate this.
I knew.
I'm
I
okay
knew you were going to be.
together.
I knew you were going to be mad.
Yeah, I get that they get back together, and I don't have a problem with that, but hold the man responsible. Come on. I got so mad at that line. So I also have a realization later about why I think I just don't see eye to eye with Bella on this. And it's a specific thing. So
okay, great. We'll get into because I also was thinking more about why I disliked this book so much. Like I feel angry every time I get done reading. Normally, okay, my video camera takes like 3 tries to turn on, and I normally start yelling at it, which did not happen when the same problem happened recording Twilight. And I'm just mad. I've just been in a bad mood every time I finish New Moon. And I did some reflection on that today. So we can get into the personal segment later.
sounds good.
Oh man, just some silly goose energy going on here. Okay. Yeah, my first note about this is she sees him and specifically she says I would never want anything but him, no matter how long I lived. And this was the moment I thought, Amy is not happy about this scene.
See, yeah, that line in particular didn't get me because I feel like she said something similar before about that, and it got me before. Yeah. So I was like, I expect that. But it was the last 7 months meaning nothing. I'm like, you were in such a deep depression that like literally you couldn't think of anything that happened for 3 months. Like
you were suicidal.
Yeah, and like to just be like, oh, that didn't happen. Like, oh, and the things he said in the forest didn't mean anything or whatever. But then it's obviously not true because she continually goes
Yeah,
back to what he's talking about in the forest and thinks that he doesn't love her. So,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
But yeah, I lost it at her to
yeah,
diss everything that happened the last 7 months. So yeah.
yeah. Hmm. Um, okay, she does get to Edward in time. She reaches him as he's stepping into the sunlight. But then he just stands there because he's a little delulu. He thinks they're in hell.
Yeah. Which is interesting because in the movie translation, obviously you don't get the whole background about their beliefs and stuff. So
Yeah.
he says heaven, and it's like in the book he thinks he's in hell. Like the opposite. Like
Yes. Okay, and Bella then later thinks she's in hell when
yeah.
Edward is in her room. Like they both assume they're in hell.
Yeah. When they're with one another. Red flag? I think that might be a red flag.
That's so bad. Bella then takes it back and is like, no, he wouldn't be here if it was hell. But still, she thinks it's hell at first.
Yeah.
Wild. Anyways, yeah. Okay, and then specifically Bella makes a comment before the Delulu Edward moment. She makes a comment about as soon as she like has him with her, like the hole in her heart that she's been referencing throughout the book feels like it's not even a scar, it was never there. Like she's totally healed. Which this is where I want to talk about my fated mates theory. Again, I'm just over here consistently making up fan theories to make Twilight a bigger fantasy than it is, and then I feel great about the story. When I don't think of it as high fantasy, I really struggle. But okay, again, so this being, and I'm like, okay, hold on. I'm getting ahead of myself. I'm sorry, audience listeners. So fated mates, I feel like makes more sense if you assume that Bella literally had part of her, like she realized this is her mate she's supposed to be with. Fated mates, if you are not familiar, haven't read a lot of like romantasy books, it is in a lot of different authors' works, but it's often like this like very like deep magical connection you have with someone. You often in a lot of the stories you're like a similar like magical level or power level, and sometimes that's the like reveal because obviously the guy is super old and has been magical for a million years and he's with a 16-year-old girl, so they got to make her equally magical since they're mates, you know. So you've got that trope going on, all the things, and then it often is like tearing your soul if they're like separated, you know. There's a lot of like lore like that in the romantasy world. And if you think of Edward and Bella in this same context, I think it makes sense of like literally her like soul has been injured with him leaving and like like letting go of her, which again we see happen in a lot of other fantasy books in not such a like cringy teen romance way. Although I give Bella credit, like I also am like a hopeless emotional creature. So like I am like, whatever, I get it, Bella. Anyways, and it makes more sense in this. Like they're together again and she feels like more whole and it's okay. Anyways, I just think that makes a lot more sense. It also like explains some like Bella becoming a higher power vampire and having like a really cool unique power that ends up being a bigger deal in later books.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I just feel like I am fine as long as I believe that.
Yeah. I hate to burst your bubble, but I disagree.
Ugh.
I think it would be better if that was the case, but I don't think that is the case. Just because like of the stuff that I brought up in the previous chapter about them talking about Carlisle speculating that it's easier for them to form bonds based on love because they don't feed on humans, when it's like vampires' nature to feed on humans. And so, like, that connection isn't there for most vampires, they make it seem like. And obviously, we don't get a ton of detail about it, but I'm like, seems to me
Yeah.
not
Well,
not
but
that.
we know other vampires have like mates. So then it's like it goes back to like their equal like power, you know, versus
Yeah,
like their equal power match. Like Victoria and James, it's not like a love thing. It's this intrinsic connection because they're like an equal like source of power. So it's still like a convenient survival move for them to like be with that person.
I feel
Does
like I
that make
don't know enough about the relationships of the other vampires because I'm curious to hear about. Did we learn in the Volturi that there's the three men and then there's the two women, which we don't. I don't think we even get their names in this. And I don't remember. I think
sexism?
they're in the movies. I could be wrong, but I don't remember any details about it, and I'm curious if we get more of that or not. So
Yeah, I don't remember either. I only remember Jane is the
yeah,
only like female Volturi. And then I didn't even realize she wasn't like a
yeah,
Volturi, you
yeah,
know?
yeah. I also totally forgot that Jane appears in this book. I was thinking we didn't get Dakota Fanning till Eclipse. So
Well, I knew she was coming. I'm glad.
yeah.
Good
If I
old
had given it
Dakota.
more thought, I would have remembered because otherwise, what would have happened in
Yeah.
the book? But yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
The only other note that I have for this chapter is talking about um Romeo and Juliet. That I just don't get the whole like Romeo and Juliet comparison completely for this because like Edward going to the Volturi to kill himself, I'm like, the whole thing with Romeo and Juliet, why they killed themselves is because they couldn't be together. But Edward already made the decision to not be with Bella. And then he learns that Bella kills herself, which she didn't, obviously, but like he learns that and thinks he needs to die. But I'm like, you already made the decision to not be with her for the rest of your life. Like, I don't get it. I don't know. Yeah.
I mean, I do get the like, like Romeo then thought Juliet was actually dead, but she wasn't,
Yeah,
you know,
obviously the
and then
analogy
he
of
kills
Romeo and
himself
Juliet.
actually. Yeah, and then she
And,
does. Like, I get it.
yeah.
Yeah.
But
But
practically, I'm like Romeo and Juliet wanted to be get together the whole time versus Edward made this decision that they weren't going to be.
yeah, yeah. And he obviously like wanted to be and thought it was, I think it's supposed to like represent like, because Edward wanted them to be together the whole time, he just didn't think Bella was safe. And so the idea that like the worst thing that could have happened, like she like killed herself because he left.
Yeah.
And then it is like, I
Yeah.
do think it's like a guilt when he's like, it's not that I felt guilty. Like it definitely is
Yeah.
part of
And
you
actually,
feeling
I
guilty.
I am realizing I kind of forgot that the reason he went to I completely forgot the reason he went to South America was that he was tracking Victoria. So that does actually change that having that context, which I didn't at this point in
Yeah,
the story. So that does change it because then it's like he's still trying to protect her. So I guess that makes
yeah,
sense. So
yeah.
answered my own question about that, I guess. But
I'm glad we worked through it.
yeah,
I
yeah,
will say the amount of Romeo and Juliet references was a little heavy for me in this book.
yeah.
It
Because a
felt like
lot
a little overdone.
Yeah, there's a lot of like different media that obviously like follows stories of different Shakespeare like stories, but normally they don't reference the actual text as much as this book does. Like there is so many references like directly where they're talking about Romeo and Juliet and Paris, and I'm just like,
Yeah.
it's a bit much.
Yeah. So I am curious moving forward, if this is just what we have picked up on or not. So book one, before the like intro, we get a Bible verse. And then there are so many biblical references and like Christian ideal references throughout book 1, which we talked about in depth in all those episodes. Okay, book 2 starts with a Romeo and Juliet quote, and then we hear about Romeo and Juliet a million times. I do have to go back. I'm curious if Midnight Sun started with a Greek mythology about Hades and Persephone's quote, because that's the most referenced thing in that book.
Yeah.
But it
seems
it does, but be, I'll pull it up. I have my Kindle right here. But yeah, it seems to be this theme, but I don't know if it's a theme or that's just happened in the first 2 books. So I'm curious going forward. I'm going to make notes.
I did just pull up Eclipse to see what the deal was for the see what it has. Should I read the quote it has?
Oh, please.
Okay, so it says, it's titled Fire and Ice. Some say the world will end in fire, some say in ice. From what I've tasted of desire, I hold with those who favor fire. But if it had to perish twice, I think I know enough of hate to say that for destruction ice is also great and would suffice. Robert Frost.
So a poetry-heavy book coming up.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay.
Which we don't really remember the plot of Eclipse. So it's hard to say if that is referenced a lot or not.
Yeah.
No. Nice. Is that just, I don't know, vampires and werewolves? Is that what it's getting at? I don't know.
I'm scrolling back to the beginning of Midnight Sun.
Yeah.
Hold on.
Midnight Sun too. I already had Midnight Sun pulled up for a different thing.
Oh, maybe there's nothing.
Yeah, I'm not sure if there is anything. I don't recall anything, but
nope, there's nothing. Interesting. Okay, well, anyways, there's that. I do have a few more notes for chapter 20. Mostly just like talking about what's happening and going through some plot points. But so one is after Edward, to jump back a bit, Edward realizes they're not in hell and Bella is really there. And so then they move back to the shadows and some spooky vampire boys come out. It is Dimitri and Alec, maybe? I don't know. Who's the other one?
I think so.
Alec? Okay. So they come out and then they are trying to start a little fight. And then
we don't even see Dimitri and Alec till the next chapter, do we? I don't think we do.
Well, then who are the two they come in chapter 20?
Oh, just kidding. Felix is one of them.
Felix and Dimitri, maybe.
Yeah. Alec
Dimitri Dimitri would make sense because he's the vampire who we find out his power is finding people.
Yeah.
So that would make sense. Okay. So they come, Felix and Dimitri, and then they're trying to start a fight with Edward, and then Alice comes, and then James comes. Or no, not James, Jane.
Plot twist.
Oh my gosh. Jane comes, and that quells the fighting because everyone is scared of our girl Dakota, aka Jane. Yeah, okay, and then they're going through all these crazy like turns in the city and jump down like a sewer grate, crazy, into the Volturi's lair. But
very much made me think of when they go into the Ministry of Magic in Harry Potter and go down the toilet.
It is like that, yeah. That's so funny. They specifically talk about Bella jumping into Alice's arms, like Alice catches Bella when she jumps down the sewer grate, and how she's gonna be so bruised because Alice is like granite. And I'm like, how has that not come up yet? Like,
also,
all
like, what's even the point of her catching her then? If it's just
let her hit the floor.
You know, like she doesn't hit her head. Is that it? Yeah.
That's so true. Yeah, because I mean, and maybe they put that in there to show how much more care and like thoughtful Edward is, that he always is like grabbing her mid momentum to like catch her and gently set her down or something. But
I
still
have
wild.
had come up on my TikTok this one specific person who makes videos talking about the weird things we don't think about in Twilight, specifically around the vampires, and like she talks a lot about like them being like granite and things, and it's pretty weird. So I'll just send some of those or put them on our Instagram or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot.
Yeah. Nice. Oh, can't wait. Yeah, so I do think that's crazy. And then yeah, again, we get another comment of Bella being like, it's better to be reunited and die now, which again is like, we get it.
Yeah.
Even for me, a little much. And then she said specifically she relaxes automatically. And at first I thought maybe that was alluding to one of the Volturi having emotional manipulation ability, which would make sense to like lure people in. But then I realized it was just because she was so cold. And it was a warm building.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I thought that was pretty funny. In again, Callie looks for things to be more magic than they are.
Yeah.
Yeah. So then that's all for chapter 20 before we jump into 21.
My first note in 21 is when Felix calls dibs on, on Bella, which also just the fact that he says dibs, and I'm like, this guy's supposed to be, well, I don't know how old he is. I'm guessing a couple 100 years old. Just saying dibs. But I'm also like, I don't remember Felix at all. And I'm like, Edward's gotta kill him at some point, right? Like, after that comment, I'm just like, he's gonna kill him. I'm pretty sure. Like,
for sure he is.
Yeah. I don't know if that actually happens. I don't know if he actually dies. I don't know.
Yeah.
So, but that's the prediction I am making now, that Edward kills him.
I am choosing in this moment that Felix says dibs to believe that he is a frat boy who's doing a study abroad program in Italy, and the Volturi realize he's going to have some cool power. So they turn him, but he's been a frat boy study abroad student.
I love it. That is new canon for Felix.
Done. You heard it here first, everyone.
Yeah.
Who else would say dibs?
I love it.
Yeah. Okay. I do have two notes before this.
Okay.
One, Bella specifically talks about how weird I think seemingly Italian is my guess since we're in Italy, but the olive skinned vampires that now are very pale, which again, I don't think they go more into, but it just feels like a weird comment that they either should have like made more of or less of to make it like less, I don't know. It just seemed really weird, especially because we know there's in the movies we see multiple like ethnicities of vampires, and it just seemed weird to imagine like people with a very olive complexion, but who then powdered themselves white, or I don't know. It just seemed weird to me.
I know, it's just hard for me to like, and I talked about this when we got that Laurent in the meadow scene before, because I was like, when she described him as pale, I'm like, didn't even think of Laurent, because in the movies Laurent is black.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's hard for me to imagine and like being described as pale not being like really white, you know? Like
yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. I just think they should have either cut the line or described it differently. It just like pulled me out of it. Anyways, the next is I forgot about the human receptionist for the Volturi headquarters. Yeah. Yeah. So that's my first note before we get the spooky Volturi.
Yeah, and we learned about Aro with his translucently white, like onion skin. That
Yes.
is verbatim what is said in the book. Translucently white like onion skin.
Yeah, which let's hope when you say translucent onion skin, I'm also thinking like cooked onion skin, like clear.
Yeah.
But maybe it's just like a thin layer of white.
Yeah, just think of like a raw onion. Like it's
Yeah.
somewhat translucent. It's not like completely clear, but like
Yeah. I'm gonna go peel an onion later and post it on Instagram. I'll put it in front of my skin.
yeah. Also, like I do think that Aro is like the creepiest one in like the movies. I obviously don't remember much
Yeah.
from the books, but like I love his character in the movie so much. And like when it happens later on when he like I guess I can spoil this because we're going to talk about it in 5 minutes, but about when he learns that Bella can resist their powers, and in the movie, the little laugh that he does is like so hilarious, but also terrifying. Like,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
just love that. So, anyway,
Yeah. He was giving a little bit King George and Hamilton vibes to me.
I'm not familiar with Hamilton, unfortunately, but
Oh my gosh, Amy,
I
change
know.
that immediately.
I know.
Um, well, that was a hilarious comment, and you didn't even get it. I hope
I,
you're enjoying internet. Laugh a lot.
I'm sure everyone else on the internet's enjoying it besides me. So,
Anyways, just a little bit. But yeah. Um, yeah, I thought his powers were so interesting. So interesting. Again,
Aros?
yes, Aro's powers so good. The idea that it's not just like your current thoughts, it's every thought you've ever had.
Mm-hmm.
Scary. That's
Yeah.
adds to the creepiness. But yeah, I just loved the lore of it's also giving kind of like oh my gosh, what's the Academy in X-Men? Do you know what I'm talking about at all?
I have not watched X-Men in so long. Like since I was a child, I haven't watched any X-Men stuff.
Yeah.
But
But just this layer where they're like collecting this like elite super powered
yeah.
vampire things. It's
Sure.
obviously not
Oh, yeah.
nefarious. It's not nefarious in X-Men. But yeah, I think it's so interesting. The Volturi, I don't know, all of this again, surprise, surprise, the most high fantasy chapter of the series so far was what I was most into. More adrenaline pumping, fast pace, lots of fantasy.
I also am very into this, and I'm excited for the books going forward because obviously we know that Callie liked Twilight the most. And I honestly, of the books we've read so far, to clarify,
Mhm.
I like New Moon more just because I
Oh,
don't care that much about Bella and Edward's relationship, to be honest. So, and yeah, anyway.
yeah,
Um, but I'm excited to get into more of the fantasy stuff for sure with the future
yeah,
book.
yeah.
And I
I
also
do,
go ahead.
oh, I think I like Midnight Sun more than Twilight, to be fair. I feel
Oh,
like I like more of that. But yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Same idea.
But I also found it interesting what Marcus's power was because I don't think we learned that at all in the movie, so I had no recollection of it. And it's that he can see people's relationships with one another. So he like sees the bond that Bella has with the Cullens. And I'm curious if his power comes up in the future with like Jacob, and if you haven't read the series, maybe you want to skip a bit ahead. But Renesmee, like
Ah,
if yeah, I don't know because I don't recall anything, but I'm like, there must be something
I
more with
mean,
it.
he must,
Yeah.
right?
So,
Yeah, interesting. He also, I think it's interesting, they're talking about how strong the bond between uh Edward and Bella is, but he says like they in a very general term, which also made me think that he's referring to the bond between like Alice and Edward and Alice and Bella, like that they're all very connected as like a family unit, which would have been very like noteworthy also.
yeah. Yeah,
kind
no,
of.
I'm just pulling it up because I'm like, what did was said? Because Alice explains that Marcus was surprised by the intensity of our relationship, and she's kind of talking to Bella. So it could be about like Alice and Bella, but it just, I have a feeling that it's probably all of the Cullens with,
Yeah, with what we know.
yeah. So
Yeah, so that very interesting. Uh we yeah, oh, the other thing that makes me so intrigued, I love some political intrigue. Like, love it with some powerful other entities messing up the plan. Some Game of Thrones plot points. I love that. I love it. Okay, so anyways, chapter 21, best chapter of the series so far, despite me disliking New Moon.
yeah.
Bummer note, we once again get frickin' Edward willing to kill Bella himself and Alice to avoid turning Bella into a vampire. And to basically just like he won't even lie about it to them. Like,
Yeah. I also find it funny that during this instance, he's like, being very pessimistic and is just generally pissed off. And Aro says how he misses Carlisle, his friend Carlisle. He's like, you remind me of him, only he wasn't so angry. And I just love the comparison of Edward being angry Carlisle. And I'm like, that's not inaccurate. Like,
oh, that's so funny. You're right. Mm.
that made me literally laugh out loud. So
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. The chapter starts kind of wrapping up when so basically I'll fill in what we just were talking about, which is Aro. At first, it looks like the Volturi are going to kill them, but Aro is so intrigued by Bella's powers, and his powers don't work on Bella. He has Jane use her powers, which are somehow, without touching them, she's able to like cause so much pain you're like crumpling to the floor. That doesn't work on Bella. And Aro is super intrigued on how this will manifest when she becomes a vampire. So then he asks Edward if he'll join the Volturi. Edward says no. He asks Alice, and then he asks Bella if she'll join them and become a vampire. She also says no. They think they're going to kill her, but they're like, if you guys, Alice and Edward, are going to turn Bella at some point, we'll let you live so that there's the potential you'll join the Volturi in the future because I'm so intrigued about your powers. Yeah. Basically is what Aro puts out there. Edward is being a dum-dum and still being like, no, even though you just said you're going to kill us if we don't do this. But Alice steps in, thank goodness, and reaches out her hand so that Aro can read all of her memories with all of the future visions, which craziness.
Yeah.
And then sees the inevitability of Bella being turned into a vampire. So yeah, and they are allowed to leave. As they are leaving, we get a very spooky scene. This is another scene from the movie that I remember quite clearly, which is the humans coming in and feeling like they're going to see either some tourist attraction or a party or something. It's not like super overt, but they're like tricked into this chamber where they're all about to be eaten.
Mm-hmm.
Eek!
I also did have a note that in regards to like the movie with this chapter, because in the movie we get a fight scene here, which is different, and it makes sense for the movie translation to have something more actiony, because otherwise
it's a lot of talking,
so boring. But yeah, and apparently Stephenie Meyer was not certain about whether or not they should do a fight scene, and like they had to work it out so that it still made sense, because that could easily be like the end of the whole series if you get in a physical fight with the Volturi, which I'm like, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So.
It also makes sense because they could have done really cool stuff with Alice's like vision, but we don't get a scene looking into Alice's, like where we get to see Alice's like mind and all the future scenarios really till breaking dawn.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, but that would have been
With
interesting.
like scenarios that don't actually happen, that kind
Yeah.
of thing.
Yeah, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Just as far as ways they could have added like more action, you know, without going from the plot. But
Yeah.
anyways. Oh man. Okay. Yeah, are we ready to jump to chapter 21? 22?
22? Yeah. I write little descriptions of what happens in the chapter so I can vaguely remember, which I have been slacking on how good they are, so I keep getting confused about what happens in what chapter. So sorry about that. But my first sentence for chapter 22 is Bella is an idiot and thinks Edward isn't in love with her. We get a lot of that in this chapter.
Yes, we do. Yes, we do. Oh man. Yeah. That is my second note also for chapter 22. First note being interesting to find about to find out about the receptionist dynamics, that she is a human, she knows everything that's happening, but she's hoping to become a vampire, which made me think of what we do in the shadows with Guillermo being a familiar waiting to become a vampire.
It's true. I haven't watched that in a while, and I only watched like a few episodes of it. But yeah, that's really, really accurate.
Yeah. And I just like thinking of Gianna, the receptionist, being like Guillermo to the
I
Volturi.
watched that whole series, and I'm sure I will relate a lot more of Twilight stuff to that, and I think that will be hilarious.
Yeah.
I think I
My
gotta watch that.
yeah, it's my plan to I stopped at season 5, so I haven't watched past that.
I didn't realize there were that many seasons. Wow.
There's at least 6 out.
Okay.
Um the season they do start to go downhill a little bit. They open a vampire nightclub. There's like there's a whole lot of things, but I will stand by the Jackie Daytona episode is so good. I might watch it after this. Anyways, okay, but I generally am going to rewatch it after we finish Life and Death is my plan to then rewatch all of What We Do in the Shadows. Which
So
we
we're
could
gonna
just
pivot our podcast to being about what we do in the shadows. That's what you were about to say, isn't
I
it?
was, yeah.
Since we can't figure out what book series we want to do next, we can just do vampire stuff.
We can just stick with a vampire themed podcast from here on out. We can become vampire experts, start watching documentaries.
Honestly, not opposed. Not opposed to that.
Okay, great. We'll start a poll. Should we do another series or anyways, vampires? Okay. So, yeah, so I thought that was interesting. My second note then is Bella still thinks Edward hates her.
Yeah.
Oh,
I have a note that I think actually might be before we get the details on the receptionist. Yeah, I have a couple notes. One of them is I just really like how Stephenie Meyer describes out of body like experiences because she talks about how she hears a sound that doesn't make sense. It's a strange, ripping counterpart to otherwise cheery background music, and she realizes that the noise is coming from her, and the ripping sound was sobs coming from her chest. And it reminded me of how she describes like with the attack with James going on in the first book, and I just think she does a good job of that. So,
yeah. Yeah. No, I feel like this is pretty consistent for me, but I think Stephenie Meyers is a great emotional writer. Like, I think she does a really good job talking about emotion, explaining how things feel in like detail. And I think that's why so many people connect with the characters more than I think they're such amazing characters. You know?
I don't know. I just like, yeah, I feel like I don't really connect with the characters that much. So like I noticed like that detail that I really like, but like there's nobody I really get that attached to in this. And maybe it's just because, like you said, like about how they're not as detailed grade of characters or whatever. I don't remember exactly what you said, and I don't want to misquote you, but
Yeah.
whatever you just said, yeah.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I feel like
Yeah.
I'm surprised. I don't get into these characters as much as, and I don't know if I ever did. I must have. I don't know. Who knows?
Yeah. I mean, I liked them when I read them. I don't dislike them. Like, I don't hate any of the characters except Mike Newton and Jessica. But yeah, yeah. I don't hate any of the characters we're supposed to like, but
Yeah.
I just, yeah, I mean, it's not like such compelling plot. It's not like sometimes she focuses on weird details, but I think she's a good emotion writer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think I struggle with it because like this is the only series that I've really read where like there's a romance that I'm like so not into. Like, and it's the main romance. And I don't know.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah. I think honestly, me feeling so meh about this is part of what makes me be like, I don't know if I want to read more like 2000s YA paranormal romance books. Because what if this is just how I feel kind of about, like, the genre was kind of just starting at this point. Like, you know, Stephenie Meyer's walked so Sarah J. Maas could run, you know, except for not really because Sarah J. Maas was already writing.
Yeah.
I think at this point, right? No, maybe not.
Yeah, I don't think quite.
I don't think yet. I don't think yet. Within like 5 years.
Yeah.
But anyways, regardless.
Yeah. Here is also where I have the note about why I just don't relate to Bella. And it's like she's having this thing where she realizes that she's sobbing like this. And they're comforting her. And she's talking about, well, when she says, I knew it was stupid to react like this about her, like, crying and being upset. And I'm like, this is like the one reaction of hers that I can get behind. Like, that was a lot that just happened, you know? Like, I don't think it's a stupid reaction. But then goes into talking about Edward and how he saved her and that, like, to have her eyes filled with tears so she couldn't see his features clearly was so wasteful. And then goes into talking about behind her tears she couldn't wash away the images of there's a panicked face of a tiny woman with a rosary, which is one of the people that's being led into and then gets killed. And like I'm like, this is why I can't relate to her, because you should swap the order of those things. Like, swap the order and talk about how you're so upset about what's happening and then realize Edward's there. I just can't get past the fact that she's all like, oh, I have these tears in my eyes and I can't see how beautiful he is. Oh, but that lady with the rosary almost died too. Like, I'm like, it should be the other way around. And it just drove me crazy reading that. I was like, I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I don't know. I don't know. Yeah, it's just not my favorite.
Yeah.
It's not my favorite. I think some of it is definitely like we're in a really different place how we react in 2024 versus 2006. How like to women expressing emotion and that being not like just like seen as like weakness negative, but like that emotion is all like okay and you can express things. So I think it's some of that. Some of it I definitely think is also, again, to, as always, take it deeper than anyone should take anything about Twilight. You know, it could very much be about Stephenie Meyer's own worldview coming from the Mormon church of women should be very like quiet and in love and happy in these relationships and less like taking up a lot of space in the forefront and pulling like all this attention and making it about themselves. That's kind of a generic overstatement. I'm not trying to offend Mormons. I'm trying to make some leaps based on my own Christian upbringing adjacent to Mormonism. Anyways, so yeah. So I think maybe there's some of that happening. either way, it does not come off well in the year of 2024 by people who are very much like, you can feel how you feel, and that's valid, even if it's crazy. You should just first be like, makes sense. Like, yeah, I don't know.
And like, I really don't have a problem with like what she's feeling in this moment and think that it's all valid. And obviously she hasn't been with him and is in love with him and like is having feelings about that. But to me, it's like it goes from talking about like this like sound that she doesn't know where it's coming from and then goes right into talking about how beautiful he is, and then it's talking about, oh, she realizes where those tears come from. And I feel like it would be more natural to realize what the tears are happening and then to talk about that. And I just really, really took me out of it being the other way around. So
yeah. Even if it wasn't about all these people that you just realized are getting murdered and you just escaped, even if it's just like, I've been so depressed and now I'm finally with the person I love again, even that would be like, make a lot more sense, you know? So yeah.
And like I said, I don't have a problem with her like reacting about the way that she is with Edward and talking about like, you know, I kind of made fun of how she said about her eyes being filled with tears and couldn't see his features clearly, which was wasteful, which is kind of a funny line. But
yeah,
I don't have a problem with her like admiring his beauty even in this moment. It's just the way that it's done, you know?
Yeah, for sure. Well, then they hop on a plane, they get out, and they head back to Forks. I think it's interesting.
They get an apology from Rosalie, which is very sincere.
Yeah. I'm curious about the Italy to Atlanta to Seattle. I guess that's not that crazy of a layover. Anyways, I just think it's interesting she includes the flight itinerary. She talks about where the layover is both times. Like, they didn't take a direct flight.
I was on layover when I came back from Italy.
Cute. Yeah, and then after some more car talk, then we get the calls and Rose apologizes. This is a big moment.
Yeah, and it's very sincere, and
yeah, genuinely.
My comment on it was, wow, out of character for Rosalie. Like,
yeah.
So
yeah. And then we get back to Bella's house and Charlie is pissed.
Yeah, I had a comment here that I'm like, they definitely should have planned this better. Like, they had that whole flight. That's a long flight. You had time to figure something out. Like,
sleep.
Yeah, like could have figured out something, you know? Obviously it's not going to be good no matter what, but like they just came up with no story as to what had happened.
Yeah. They could have had Carlisle or Esme reach out. Like, they're seemingly just waiting, filled with anxiety to find out what's going to happen. They could have reached out to Charlie and talked about something. You know, like, there just was a lot of...
Yeah, I feel like we didn't get a lot about what was going on with Carlisle and Esme, because before we got like talking about Emmett and Rosalie and Jasper, but we don't hear much about what they're doing. And I think that's probably why Stephenie doesn't want to do another Edward POV, because she'd have a lot to explain. So
Yep, she would. We know Esme is restoring a house. That's it.
Yeah, she doesn't like Ella.
Right.
Oh my god.
Yeah. Yeah. Which brings us to chapter 23. Oh, sorry. My notes did another autocorrect and I was like, what am I saying? Something about a dwarf, but it autocorrected Edward to dwarf. So yeah. Anyways, okay, 23.
Yeah. Bella wakes up from sleeping. And I had a note immediately about when she wakes up. She's saying she couldn't remember what day of the week it was, but was sure Jacob or school or work or something was waiting for me. And I'm like, I don't like that she's just listing Jacob here as an obligation. Like, you know, like,
yeah,
that kind of bothered me, but
yeah. Yeah, for sure. Um, I thought it was hilarious that she sees Edward and one of her first thoughts is, or a line that she says is, "My hallucinatory Edward is normally better fed." I just thought that was so funny.
I didn't catch that. That's pretty funny.
Because she's like, his eyes are so dark. He's got all these bags under his eyes. Like, my hallucinatory Edward is normally well fed.
That's funny.
Oh man. Yep. Yeah, and then I have my comment when I'm like, they both, at least for a minute, assume they're in hell when they see each other. That's concerning to me.
Yeah, the first words out of Bella's mouth are, "Oh crap."
Yeah. Oh, so funny.
And she's that she drowned and that she's dead and that it's gonna kill Charlie that she's dead.
It's just.
Meanwhile, a chapter ago, she was willing to die and didn't care what Charlie thought about that. So,
Consistent in the moment. In the moment. Yeah. Okay, then they finally have the hard conversation that Bella keeps putting off. She hasn't had it on the plane. She didn't want to sleep, but she also didn't want to have this conversation with Edward, aka what do we do now? What do I tell you, assuming you're leaving again? Are you leaving again? Just this kind of big heart to heart. Also, in this section, they address that they have made a promise that Bella is going to be turned into a vampire to the Volturi, and the Volturi have told them they're going to come check. Mm-hmm. So they start to discuss this as well. Mm-hmm. Yep.
And Edward's like, just kidding, we're not really going to do that. Why'd you think that? We just told a bunch of ancient vampires we were going to. That doesn't mean we're going to. Like, come on.
Yeah. I did think of, I was Michael Scott from The Office yelling at Edward in this chapter. Edward was Dwight in the safety training episode. Do you know what I'm talking about? when he's on the roof and he's gonna jump.
Oh yeah. Dwight, you ignorant slut. Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
My final comment, I have a comment before this, but my final comment is, Edward, you ignorant slut.
Oh, that's so funny.
Oh man, because I'm like, you're kind of being a dummy. He's being a dummy.
I also had a comment in here saying fuck Edward. He was talking about the werewolves and was talking about, oh, sorry that you had to put your life in the hands of werewolves. Immature, volatile, the worst thing out there besides Victoria herself. And I'm like, fuck you, Edward. They literally saved her life. Like,
yeah. Which, thank goodness, he addresses that later. But
yeah, he does address it.
Yeah. Okay, one thing that did clear up a thing we have complained so much about in the last 3 episodes is in this chapter we find out that Edward thought he was tracking Victoria this whole time. Yeah. Which clears up a lot.
Detail, which they don't talk about in the movies. Like, he goes to South America, but we don't get a reason why. Like,
yeah. So that was good. I was very happy about that because obviously that made 0 sense and we've complained about it plenty. So then we switch to chapter 24 because Bella says, Edward, this is nonsense that you're not going to let me become a vampire. You're putting your entire family at risk, so I'm going to have your family vote on if I should become a vampire. Mm-hmm. And then she says, let's go now, because vampires don't sleep, and it's 1 a.m.
And on the way there, we talk a little bit about the hallucinations.
Yes, we do. Which brings me to my first comment of chapter 24. Ugh. Just her subconscious.
Yep. And okay, the reason that I said something like, because I wasn't sure how much we got, like, because obviously we talked about how it's not addressed in the movies. And
Yeah.
then I was looking at Stephenie Meyer's website that has frequently asked questions for New Moon. Because when we were talking about this, like, initially, I didn't realize that you didn't know what it was. And so I was like, I'm pretty confident I remember what happened, but I wanted to figure it out. And so I looked at her frequently asked questions, and one of them is, was Edward somehow physically connected to Bella with the whole hearing voices thing? And it straight up says no. She had such a powerful like feelings that her subconscious produced some very convincing delusions. And because this was a frequently asked question, I was like, oh, is it not answered in the book? So
Oh,
that's why I thought that there might not be anything. So
yeah. Yeah. That makes sense. I'm glad they are overt about it.
yeah,
I'm choosing to ignore that.
that
Um,
I get that. It
yeah.
is. I remember being pissed when I read the book the
Yeah.
first. So
And I think I just accepted it because I think I remembered a little bit that it was her subconscious. But then how it's written is just she gives so many more hints. And I think that's part of she was trying to make this one more a mystery like Twilight. And the mystery was he there? So she leaves all these like clues and kind of implies things that he is there. But
also,
I just think it's dumb.
yeah. I was looking up about this to make sure that I had it right a while ago, and it came up on this Reddit page where the person was just wrong in what they were saying because they were saying that she didn't actually see him in the hallucinations, but she definitely does because, like you said earlier, like he seems more well fed in her hallucinations, so she definitely does. But they said
Yeah.
that the reason that they showed actual images of him in the movie was because people wouldn't want to see a movie that Robert Pattinson wasn't in until the very end. Which I'm like, that's kind of valid, but also not true. But
Well, I'm like, the people didn't want to see it. People were content looking at Taylor Lautner.
yeah,
They didn't want to pay Edward all that money to be in this movie, or Rob, they didn't want to
yeah,
pay Robert Pattinson all the money to show up for 10 minutes.
yeah. And they did like something, well, I guess not similar because that isn't what happened in this book, but like, yeah, in the first movie, like Taylor Lautner or Jacob isn't in it until like the end, but they show him
Yeah.
earlier. So
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
Oh man. Anyways, so I'm ignoring that and I'm going with my fated mate thing, and that Bella, I think, genuinely thinks that that's her subconscious, but I think it's something deeper and magical because I'm on a personal mission to make this deeper fantasy than it is.
I know I remember being mad about that the first time I read this book, and that was before this was like the first
Yeah.
fantasy-esque book that I read. And like I was mad at it having no other context with fantasy books. And
Yeah.
now having the context of other fantasy books, I'm like, it's so stupid. It's just so stupid.
Yeah. This is actually, that's a good point. This is for sure the first fantasy book I had ever read. I hadn't read Harry Potter, like none of
Yeah, neither did
those.
I.
Like, I guess I had read Gregor the Overlander, which we talked about before, which is a fantasy, but that's it. That's it. One middle grade story. So, yeah.
Yeah.
Nope. Dumb. Ignoring.
Yeah.
Choosing to believe something else. Ignoring Stephenie Meyer's website. I'm like, I'll make up a version. I believe Bella thinks it's herself subconscious.
I
That's fine.
also have another frequently asked question that I read, which I wasn't even going to bring up, but all of a sudden I just remembered it. And someone asked, what happened to Lauren's hair? Because that's a weird detail that we get. And
Yeah.
her answer to it, I'm like, Stephenie Meyer just like a mean girl? Because it's a mean answer. She's like, oh, I had fun imagining this one. It turned like there's a whole story behind why she got her hair cut like that. And it's because she fell victim to the model discovered in the mall scam, and some modeling agent convinced her to cut her hair. And that she's still waiting to hear back from them, and it was like a scam. And I'm just like, why do you have this backstory on this character that isn't at all? And it's just meter. Like, I don't, yeah, it's weird. It is really weird.
The most minor character. That's so
She didn't even make it to the movies. Like,
weird. When
Yeah.
they talked about her in this book, I honestly didn't even remember her in Twilight. Like,
I only remember because
weird.
when we read about her in Twilight, I'm like, I don't think this person's in the movies. Like, but that's yeah. But I'm just like, that's the same thing to happen.
That's unhinged, Stephenie. That's unhinged.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's okay. So then I just make a lot of notes about how this is annoying. I don't like the lore. I don't like the subconscious thing. I miss Sarah J. Maas. I don't and it's just me venting. So we're going to skip all that. Then we're going to jump to the vote. Yes, so everybody gets to vote. There are 2 people who say no.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone else says yes to Bella becoming a vampire and becoming a member of the family. 1 no is Edward. Surprise, surprise. 1 no is Rosalie, which is also not surprising, but I actually liked Rosalie in this section because she talks about that she wishes that she had a choice, and if she did have a choice, she wishes somebody would have said no for her because she had so many regrets. And I think this is actually heartfelt and genuine, which is just not the case. This is kind of the second interaction that Bella and Rose have had that's genuine. So I still support
that you started it off by saying that you like Rosalie in this moment, because I highlighted what she said and my comment on it was, do I like Rosalie now? Because I think it's totally valid, her reasoning, and I think Bella also sees that her reasoning is very valid.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Then Edward has a temper tantrum. I was actually surprised when he runs off yelling, and then you hear like a crashing, like he's I guess throwing shit. I don't know.
That was one of the frequently asked questions.
Fill me in.
Do you want to know what he broke? Let me find where the question is. What did Edward break in the living room after the vote? Edward ripped into halves a 60-inch plasma TV that the Cullens had shipped in from Korea because it's not available in the States yet. Emmett was a bit annoyed. Verbatim what it says on the website.
What are these details? It's so funny.
I'm also like curious, like, did she have these details beforehand and just like didn't find a way to fit it in the book, or is she just making shit up? Because I honestly could see it being either way. Like,
okay, they do talk about in writing, like you're supposed to know the world and all these things so much like deeper. So I believe that she had like these backstories that got edited out, but like
I said, I could see it being either way. Like,
including on the FAQ that like they had it brought in from Korea, like needless.
Yeah. I know. I thought that was so funny.
Nonsense. Do you think Stephenie Meyer goes to cons? I feel like I have to meet her. Like, this is so unhinged. Oh man. Okay. So the consensus was made, and then Edward comes back in from his temper tantrum and brings up an excellent point, because Bella is like, great, change me now. Which is a little crazy. And
I have a note here that I just have to share that I thought was so funny, such a funny line. And Edward is making the point saying in about 2 hours, Charlie will be looking for you, and he wouldn't put it past the police he wouldn't put it past him to involve the police. And Bella makes a comment and says, all 3 of them, meaning all 3 police, which I just thought was so funny.
Yeah, like, it's mostly Charlie, but still.
Yeah.
I know, it's so funny.
But it's a valid point to not turn her in that moment. Especially she's all like, Alice, just do it. And Alice is like, I will kill you. Like, calm down.
Alice is like, I was all for women supporting women, but now I'm a little concerned.
Yeah. It's 1 o'clock in the morning. Chill out.
Yeah. You just woke up from sleeping 14 hours and thought you were in hell. So
Maybe we
let's
just
back
take a
up.
breather for a day or two.
Yeah. Anyway, so they convince Bella to wait until a timing that actually makes sense, aka she graduates and goes off to college and then would get turned into a vampire, which makes so much more sense.
Yeah.
So thanks goodness. Carlisle is a true angel and promises her regardless he will change her when she graduates, which I think is cute.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Super cute.
Yeah. Then they go back to Bella's house, Edward and Bella, and Edward says, "What do you want more than anything else?" And then she says, seemingly he knows this is what she's going to say, but she wants Edward to be the one who turns her. And so then they're negotiating what she would give. And so he's like, will you wait 5 years if I'm the one who turns you? She's like, no, blah, blah, blah. They keep going. Oh, I also forgot to mention, Edward gives an impassioned plea that they should not turn Bella because they're not going to be able to find Bella.
Oh, yeah.
Because they can't pick up on her location. They're going to use Dimitri to find her, but Dimitri won't know. I definitely think this is kind of a flawed plan, but it's hilarious that like Emmett just jumps in and is like thrilled to like pull a heist on the Volturi.
It's definitely flawed because James was able to follow her and like they aren't gonna know, like even if they have Alice's power, they aren't necessarily gonna know when the Volturi shows up because it's a bunch of powerful vampires with their own powers that I'm sure they'd find a way to work around shit. Like,
and how do you know, like, they show up, Bella's not there, and they're like, we only let you go to see what kind of vampire powers Bella would have. Guess we're gonna kill all of you now.
yeah.
Like, or you've like let go of this person and now she's out and she can let our secret out, so we have to kill her and we have to kill you guys. You know, like
Edward
it's
is
not
just
a good
being
plan.
stubborn about not turning her. So
Yeah. Anyways, okay, so we're back. Jump forward again. We're in Bella's room. Edward's negotiating. Finally, he says, okay, what if you wait 1 year? You wait till you're 19, but we have to get married and then I'll turn you. Bella reacts very strongly to this idea. And I think it's mostly she doesn't want to tell her parents. Like, she doesn't want her parents to come to the wedding. She's like embarrassed to tell them. That's the only reason that makes sense to me, is that her mom is so against getting married young. Charlie is against the people getting married young because they had a bad experience. So she doesn't want to get married young to like bring that up with her parents.
yeah.
Nonsense. Absolute nonsense. She obviously is going to have to go live with the Cullens. It just, I don't know. It's just a nonsense logic. Like, whatever. It's crazy.
Yeah, I just like I don't get her thought process. She's like worried about her parents' reaction, and it's like, you realize you're going to be a vampire. Like, how are you going to explain that to your parents? Like, why are you worried about marriage? Like, one is much more easy to explain than the other.
And you literally just said, like a chapter ago, to Charlie, oh no, maybe that's coming up. Either way, Charlie is like, you can't see Edward anymore. And she's like, well, I'll just move out. I'll just leave you. Like,
that happens in the epilogue, but yeah, she does.
Okay, but like, then she's like, not cool to marry him. Like, I don't know. I do think you can feel however you feel about very young marriages. I don't always think it's a great idea, but also I got married super young and it's worked out so far for me. So, yeah, whatever. But that's not what this is about. And it's just nonsense. She's willing to become a vampire to stay with him for forever, but is not willing to marry him is so weird.
Yeah.
So weird.
It is very, very weird. I do like the movie just cuts it off after the proposal. It's the proposal and the end of the movie. I also remember the audience going wild when that happens.
Yeah.
But I kind of like that they cut it off there, like rather
Yeah.
than going into this whole I'm too young kind of thing. And it's like, oh, but I could turn into a vampire forever and spend the rest of my life with you, no problem. But this piece of paper we gotta sign in this ceremony, I don't know.
Yeah, this thing that we could undo if we like had to, not cool. The one that's permanent for all of eternity moving forward. That's the one I'm confident in. It's nonsense. Yeah. Okay, and then
I also 100% forgot that this book and movie ends with a proposal. I totally forgot that.
same. I did not think that happened in this one. Yeah. Then we have the epilogue, which is mostly a bummer. It's a way sadder note. It'd be kind of like more dramatic to end it with the proposal for the book also. I get why they chose that for the movie. Because instead, we just get this drama. I mean, it's good they wrap up like the dynamics with the pack now, although we're going to get more into it in Eclipse. Anyways,
I mean, they have to touch on this because it's like she hasn't even seen Jacob when she gets back, and if we got that, we'd be pissed, you know?
Yeah, that's true. That's true. We do hate the open-endedness. Which,
I was
speaking
going
of,
to ask you about that.
can we just say once again, Victoria's gone, and we're like, it's fine.
Yeah.
Again?
Yep, I was pretty sure that's how it ended, so.
So dumb. Okay.
Which I don't remember what happens with Victoria. She must die. I don't remember who or how they kill her, but she must, and it must happen in Eclipse.
I feel like I remember, but the scene I remember is definitely in Breaking Dawn, and I don't remember if it is Victoria or Jane or some other scary female vampire. Like, I can't picture who it is.
I also did remember something that happens in Eclipse, which it's not a big spoiler. I'm not worried about telling you, but because I remembered because of the book order that we're reading, because we're reading the novella between Eclipse and Breaking Dawn, which means we get the newborn vampires in the next book. So that happens in Eclipse.
Oh yeah.
Because that's what I can't remember that character's name that the book is about. But we get her. Yeah, Bree Tanner. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. True.
That happens in Eclipse, which I thought that was Breaking Dawn. So
yeah. That tracks though. I think I don't know.
I don't remember how that all resolves though. Or who knows? It probably doesn't.
Maybe that's okay. Here's my new theory is that Eclipse ends with him turning Bella. And then like that's the end of Eclipse, maybe.
I think maybe we know Dawn. I don't think she gets turned to a Breaking Dawn. I could be wrong though.
Okay. Anyways, well, we'll see.
Oh wait, no, I'm thinking of something else. It might end with her getting turned.
Yeah, that would just be a very dramatic moment to end it on.
Also, they're talking about like getting married at this point, so yeah, they must. We'll see. Anyway,
we'll see. We'll see. We'll see.
Back to the epilogue.
Yeah. So it ends one in a big emotional betrayal that Jacob drops off the motorcycle.
Which, when this happened, I'm like, what are you doing? Like, this cannot just be Jacob. But then we get the context behind that he thought that she was just ignoring him and not seeing him. And he wanted to get her in trouble so she couldn't see Edward anymore and get her grounded. And she's like, I'm already grounded, you dummy. Like, that's why I haven't seen you. Like, so.
Yeah. Yeah. And I wish she would have also said, which you would have known if you had answered one of my calls, you know? Like,
I know, I had questions here about that. I'm like, is he trying to like keep his distance because he doesn't want Edward reading his mind about something, which turns out not to be true because Edward does read his mind and there isn't anything, but
Yeah.
That makes it sound like he has no thoughts in his head at all.
Right. No, I think he's just mad at her. I think he
Yeah.
literally is just so mad that she's chose the vampires over the werewolves, and he didn't think she was going to, and he's
Yeah.
having a little
And
hissy fit.
I also do think that he thinks that means something else than when it does, and he thinks that it means that they will never see each other again and he'll be out of her life completely. So I think he assumes that, and
Yeah. Yeah. Hmm. Yeah.
um and then at the very end we get some more details about the treaty and the fact that the treaty is very specific and it's broken if any of the Cullens bite anybody, not if they kill them.
Yep. 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 Which makes sense as a treaty that you're worried your enemies are going to build an army of vampires to turn against you. But still, is a plot twist.
It is. And
Mhm.
Bella's pretty pissed about that. So
Yeah. Yeah. Which, okay, here's my question about this. Do you think this just applies to this area? Like, can they just go on a vacation to Mexico and then turn her into a vampire and come back? I feel like maybe.
I love that. Loophole, let's go to Mexico. um Yeah, my guess is that it's if it's anywhere, because otherwise they would do that. Like they were just in Italy, they can travel somewhere. Um, yeah, I'm trying to.
Because it also seems weird that they would have a treaty determining what the Cullens are allowed to do as a whole anywhere, not just like in their area.
Yeah,
Feels like more power than they should have.
yeah, and also think about like in the past, like some of them have gone off, and like Edward went off and like was killing people or whatever, and like what if one of them leaves and does that? Like, and who is considered a Cullen? You know, like
Yeah. Yeah. And they've had visiting vampires
yeah,
who then they haven't told you're not allowed to be here if you hunt. They've just told them like you can stay as long as you want, you just can't hunt in this area.
yeah. I have a prediction
Oh,
for Stephenie Meyer's next book. It is just a copy of all of the supporting documents, including the treaty and how the Cullens have as much money as they do and all of the things they forged. That's what I think our next book is going to be. It's just a reference.
incredible. Incredible.
Because I want to see
uh,
the treaty.
oh man. Well, Amy, what would you rate New Moon?
I actually did rate New Moon because I
Oh,
put it on my story graph for reference. I feel like people who listen to this podcast are probably pretty into Twilight. Obviously, we talk a lot about Twilight.
we are the least into Twilight of our viewership.
I feel like they're going to be pissed about my ratings because I was going to give, for context, I gave Twilight 2.5 stars. So that's where the bar is at. I don't remember
What'd you give Midnight Sun?
I don't remember. I didn't look at that. Let me look right now. Um, because I went and looked because when Jacob was talking about his ratings, I went to look, but I didn't look to see what I gave Midnight Sun, or if I gave it. I also gave Midnight Sun a 2.5, which I'm surprised I didn't give it a little more. But
Yeah, I would have thought it was a 3 for you.
yeah, New Moon was a 3 for me, 3.0. So that's what I gave it.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. I also would give because actually I did give it a 3. Because you can rate it at the end when you finish on Kindle, and I did finish on Kindle and it automatically puts it on your Goodreads. Anyways, yeah, I gave New Moon a 3. It would have been a 2 except for chapter 21.
Yeah.
Just like enough lore. Like this section that we read today was the most interesting of the whole book. I would have given it like a 2-star before this, but today pulled it up.
Yeah, I definitely liked that chapter the most for sure too. But I think I also like the rest of the book more. I don't like how Bella is in it. Like she's obviously going through some shit and isn't treating people the best and
Yeah.
whatnot. But I like that we get a lot more of the werewolf lore and stuff. And obviously I'm Team Jacob, so I like getting more Jacob stuff. But
Yeah.
I really like in this book we get a lot more lore of both the vampires and the werewolves. So
Yeah. Yeah. I think both Twilight and Midnight Sun were like 3.5-star reads for me.
okay.
So yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I know I'm curious to see what I give the rest of the books, because
yeah. I honestly cannot remember if I like in my head, I think the next two books are I think I like each one more from here on out. Like I think I like Eclipse more than either of the first two, and I think Breaking Dawn is my favorite of all the books. I'm pretty
think that's
sure
what it is for me too, except obviously I also like New Moon more than I like Twilight. So I think it's built throughout the series for me.
Yeah.
We obviously get more into the lore and it gets more fantasy like, you know. So
Yeah, so we'll see. Updates moving forward. We are not taking any time off. We're going to jump into season 3, book 3 right away next week.
Chapters 1 through 6 and the first 25 minutes of the movie.
Yes, of Eclipse.
Yes.
Of Eclipse, just to make that overtly clear. Some other just quick little announcements. One, the merch shop is up and functioning. We had a little technical issues, but we are good to go. So yeah, you can find that link in our bio on Instagram specifically. Otherwise, it is glitterymusings.square site, I believe. Yeah, so we've got that. And the final, most important announcement is that this episode is going live on Election Day on the US. So please go vote. And we at Glittery Musings fully endorse Harris.
I'm sure we're making a political endorsement today.
We're doing a political endorsement.
Yeah.
Because it's a shady time in the US, so we gotta.
I'm cool.
Yeah, you like how I knew Amy would be down. I didn't even ask her.
I currently have a poster right here that I don't think you can read that says ban bigots, not books. So I feel like that kind of not surprising.
Yeah. So, again, do we normally want to get political on a Twilight podcast? No, but I think me and Amy just both feel very strongly about just what a bad, terrible dude Trump is. And it's just pretty sad that the US is so divided and divisive. So we hope you can vote for someone who's not a felon and not violent against women and minorities and.
Also, Tim Walz is currently my governor, and Tim Walz is pretty great too. So,
guys, if you donate right now, it's too late because it's election.
Yeah. The hot dish, right?
He sends you his hot dish recipe, and that's the most Minnesota nonsense thing I've ever heard.
I love it.
I love it so much. Anyways, that's all we'll say. But yeah, go vote. It's election day. You just spent 2+ hours listening to us talk about New Moon. Go vote. You have the time.
Priority straight people. Vote and then watch the podcast or listen. Come on.
Made this announcement at the beginning. We waited.
I should put a disclaimer.
A disclaimer, please go vote before you listen to this episode. Okay. Yeah. Anyways, thank you guys so much. We will resume with section 1 of Eclipse next week. Eclipse is going to be 4 weeks also, Amy. Is that correct?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure. I don't have it right in front of me, but I'm almost positive. The schedule is up on Instagram. Yeah, it's 4 weeks. Yep.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Great. Okay, thanks, guys.
Bye.
Bye.